Amen. I feel like we really need that sense of healing right now. Healing for our world, healing for folks in the midst of struggles, fighting off virus, after whatever challenges they're experiencing. But our country also, I feel, is again just experiencing such deep fractures. I want to share words from Dr. Barbara Williams Skinner. She is an activist, a preacher, and a prayer. This is what she wrote. The video image of a white Minneapolis policeman pinning down a handcuffed black man, George Floyd, with his knee for 7 long minutes, despite Floyd continually repeating, "I can't breathe," has absolutely pierced my heart. As the grandmother of 5 black male children, I find myself crying out to God in prayer on their behalf. And for the many other black men in my world, my godson, my pastor, my brothers, my male clergy colleagues, young men in our millennial leadership program and others, I'm crying out today, much like the Old Testament prophet Habakkuk, who centuries ago cried out in response to injustice of his time, saying, "How long, God, must I call for help, but you do not listen? Or cry out to you violence, but you do not save? Why do you make me look at injustice? Why do you tolerate wrongdoing? Destruction and violence are before me. There is strife and conflict abounds. Therefore, the law is paralyzed and justice never prevails. The wicked hem in the righteous so that justice is perverted." She continued and says, Habakkuk said it all. Violence against black men is everywhere in America. Eric Garner, who also died 5 years ago when multiple police restrained him and ignored his "I can't breathe." Also Michael Brown, Freddie Gray, countless others, and now George Floyd. Friends, I know this is so hard to hear. It's sad, and there's enough sadness around us. It's hard because it makes some of us feel uncomfortable. But folks, we need to live in the midst of that discomfort because there are people dying for who they are, not for what they have done. And we have some experience with that, lest we forget. Psalm 119 says, "Open my eyes that I may see wondrous things in your law." So let's open our eyes and recognize that there are lots of people who are in pain. And we can't just nod our heads and turn away. I think because many Jews of Ashkenazi descent live with white skin, we experience something called privilege. It isn't easy to talk about privilege, and I don't think I really understood what it meant until about a year ago. And I'm going to share a definition with you. Privilege is unearned social power accorded by the formal and informal institutions of society to all members of a dominant group. Privilege is usually invisible to those who have it because we're taught not to see it. But nevertheless, it puts them at an advantage over those who do not have it. I don't know if I have been naive or just blinded by a sense of privilege. And I struggle with that today, but it's time to open those eyes, to open and incline our ear to the Holy One, to hear some different kinds of truths. Privilege is something that Nobody taught me how to manage. So I want to, in quotes, check on our privilege a bit, our benefits, our efforts to not typically notice challenges that other people face. It isn't a conversation about political correctness. It's about understanding and empathy and being an ally. So listen, not to my words, but to others who have lived experience. It's not about a sermon or me preaching. It's about listening to folks who have different experiences than our own. Imani Perry, a Princeton professor and author of Breathe, A Letter to My Sons, she wrote a line that has taken up residence in my heart and in my soul. She wrote, "How do you become in a world bent on you not being and not becoming?" I shared that with all of you on Yom Kippur after doing my own deep reflecting, and I haven't been able to stop thinking about that line. How do you become in a world bent on you not being and not becoming? Racism violates the core Jewish principle that all human beings are created b'tselem Elohim, with God's image and characteristics and attributes, every single one without any exception, with the attendant dignity and value inherent in every human being. In our liturgy, we read Somech Noflim v'Rofeh Cholim u'Matir Asurim. Somech Noflim, you support those who fall. Heal the sick, free the captive. That is what we're called to do. And since it is my theology that we are God's partners, continuing the work of creation, it wasn't just those first 6 days. We're partners in continuing the work of creation. Then I believe that the way God supports and heals and liberates is through us, you and me. So we can't sit idly by. Now, some of you are going to say, well, what can I do? What can we do? How do I experience this? How do I check privilege? What is it that I'm supposed to do? All the more so in Boulder County, in the Jewish community, Congregation Har Hashem. First thing is I'm going to say, learn. Open your eyes. Help me to open my eyes. Teach me. Instruct me. Let's learn. Let's listen. Don't answer. Just listen. Read something you don't typically read, whether it's Imani Perry's Breathe, or How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram Kendi, or something from the Jewish community, Moral Resistance and Spiritual Authority, Our Jewish Obligation to Social Justice by Rabbi Seth Limmer and Jonah Pesner, because those are going to be the things that will help teach you and me on how to be an ally. And an ally doesn't stand in agreement. To be an ally is a verb. It requires action, presence, not a hashtag. In Rabbi Harold Schulweiss's book from some years ago, it's called Conscience. Conscience, the duty to obey and the duty to disobey. He retells a story of Henry David Thoreau. Thoreau was a lifelong abolitionist who lectured against the government's fugitive slave law, defended the abolitionist John Brown, and opposed the Mexican-American War. And I know all of you who have forgotten all of those things from high school are going to start Googling, but I'm going to tell you to wait. Don't Google quite yet. I know you're not in front of me quite the same way, but wait till later. On July 25th, 1846, Thoreau ran into his friend Sam Staples, the town's local tax collector. Staples asked Thoreau to pay for the 6 years of delinquent poll taxes, and Thoreau refused to pay because he explained he wouldn't support what he thought would spread slavery into Mexico. Staples pleaded with him and then said, "I understand your opposition. If you can't find the money, I'd be happy to lend it to you. But the law is the law, and if you refuse, I must arrest you and put you in prison. Henry, understand that I have no alternative." And Thoreau answered, "Yes, you have, Sam. You can resign your job." When Ralph Waldo Emerson, a close friend of Thoreau, visited him in jail, he asked Thoreau, "What in the world, Henry, are you doing here?" And Thoreau answered, "And what in the world, Ralph, are you doing out there?" Faith isn't supposed to be passive. It's not about polite agreement. It's supposed to disrupt our inclinations and recognize that we have to stretch in order to be better and closer to one another and to the Kadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy One of Blessing. And here is one last perspective, and I think a perspective of Judaism that I think we can all learn a lot from. It's written actually by Reverend Cornell William Brooks. Brooks is the former national president of the National Association of the Advancement of Colored People, an incredible attorney and activist. And he said, "Judaism asserted for the first time in human history the likeness of every human being to God, and that it is this very bodily likeness to God that gives human beings innate worth. So much so that in the moral vocabulary of rabbinic sources, dignity of God and human dignity are used interchangeably. Exodus," Brooks says, "makes clear that humanity is both unable to and proscribed from reducing God to a person-made image. We as human beings are divinely crafted mirrors. We as human beings are divinely crafted mirrors of the handiwork of our Creator, and as such are endowed with an innate value of that reflected image in all the refracted and racially diverse beauty." Amen to that. And if we think that that could be true, if we believe, really believe, that we are divinely crafted mirrors without an exception to that, then how do we stand idly by? This isn't an easy thing for me to preach. And this isn't an easy thing for, I think, you to hear. But we have some growing to do. And I think we have some caring to do. And it's that much harder to do it in this time of pandemic where I can't even shake somebody else's hand and call them brother and sister. So let's try and figure out how to stretch. Let's figure out how to learn and listen. So easy for me and for others to challenge somebody's lived experience without walking in their shoes. Can we try and figure out how to stop doing that? Let's challenge our own myths and just do some listening to the pain and hurt of others. Because if we can start there, if we can start just there, then maybe we can figure out how to make these communities, states, our country, our policies more just, better, more fair, respecting human dignity for all. So I invite you to take a breath And let's turn back into the Siddur.